There's something that I need to address, and I tried to address it in a previous video, but it seems like it's not being heard. So I'm going to address it here. And I think probably the reason why it's not being heard is because God didn't make it be heard, and he wanted to bring this to light, to make it important enough to me to really communicate to you. So this is not to shame anybody, but to help you to understand a little bit better what God's servants go through and the position that you need to be in, the posture that you need to have with them in order to appreciate, in order to know what you've been given, and also in order for you to put yourself into their shoes and use their offering appropriately. How part of the way that you use a person's offering appropriately is to place yourself in their shoes and imagine what that would be like so that you can be built in a situation that God hasn't directly sent into your life, but that someone is offering. You know, it's possible for you to learn things through someone else's offering, through empathy and through understanding what they're going through. By honing empathy and placing yourself into their shoes rather than acting like you understand everything. And we do that a lot. We act like we understand what Jesus went through. We act like we have some sort of narrative. We don't. And as we start placing ourselves in the shoes of those who have served, we not only hone appreciation, but we also start to understand the language that they've used, the sacrifices that they made. Do you know what it's like to live a life where you're not sinning? Because I don't know what that's like. It's hard enough for me to do what I'm doing right now. I don't know what it's like to know that I'm the Lamb of God and to go through a life in this flesh in which I don't sin, in which I love others and consider them more important than myself, to where I have not sinned in my entire life and am perfect and blameless so that I can be sacrificed for people who spit in my face and beat me and kill me and then profane my name. I don't know what that's like. Do you? Do you think it might be important for us to consider what that's like so that we can understand the grief of God? So that we can understand what he feels like when we're profaning his name after everything he's done for us, so that we can understand the Father's outrage over that and the wrath that he brings on certain people. It's important. Do you know what it's like to make a decision not to marry, to withhold from your own desires for companionship, to live a life utterly alone, set apart for the kingdom of heaven, because you consider the ministry that you're doing for other people and for the kingdom of God to be more important than your own comfort, than your own companionship, than to have a human being here who's sharing in the responsibilities of life and bills. Do you know what that's like? Paul did it. I'm doing it right now. I have every right to get married. It's not a sin, but I made that decision for the kingdom of heaven. Are you going to tell me that someone who just isn't married knows what I feel? No, they don't know what I feel because they didn't make that decision for the same reason. And something was said last night that keeps being said, and I'm so over it. And I took it up with God because I didn't want to say anything out of anger or frustration. But I will tell you, I feel angry when I hear things like this, and I feel frustrated when I hear people say, oh, I know what you're going through because such and such. Don't say that stuff, you guys. Don't say that to anybody. Just because you lost your mom and I lost my mom doesn't even mean that either one of us understands each other. Maybe one of us had a good run with our mom, but I was held from my mom. I never got to get close to my mom. It's not the same. And that's not what was said last night. What's being said to me repeatedly. And let me tell you something. Some of you came around a minute ago. I've been doing this for a while with the Father. He's been crushing me and breaking me low. How can you claim that the offering that God has me giving is the same thing as what you just started doing a minute ago? It's not the same thing. I didn't give up my wealth because I did something wrong or for any other reason. I'm not in the position that I'm in right now because I have nothing to lose. I'm in the position right now because the Father told me these things are not of me. What's it going to be? My process has been very different from someone who just lost everything or never had anything to lose to begin with. It's very different. And it's an insult to God's servants when people say that it is the same thing that they're experiencing. It is not the same thing. I didn't give it up because I didn't want to work. I gave up a lot to be where I am right now and to be doing what I'm doing right now. And I want to share with you because I think it's important that you understand where God brings his servants in order to serve you so that you can appreciate it and stop saying stupid things like that. It's not the same thing. It is not the same thing as someone who comes from another country. And I'm not diminishing what people experience when they're coming from another country and they've got only the money in their pocket. But you cannot equate two people's experiences, particularly those that have been built by God in his servants. It's not the same thing. I gave up my career. I gave up my wealth. I gave up the prospect of marriage and companionship. I gave up living near my kids, moving where I want to live, selling what it is that I earned. I earned what I had, and I intended on using it to have a certain life with my kids. My children live in poverty right now. They've given up for what I'm doing. The only way that I got through justifying that I was going to school and I was working and everything else is that I was building a life for my daughter. I thought I was doing the right thing. Do you know how it feels to later decide, well, I'm going to give all this stuff up for God. And my daughter's sitting there like, okay, thank God he's brought my daughter into understanding and supporting what I'm doing. But I wanted to be able to help my daughter. The whole point of me spending all those years striving and working was to have some sort of payoff at the end, was to build a life and a future for my kid and to be able to enjoy my grandchildren and my family. I've given that up. Don't tell me it's the same thing as what you showed up a minute ago to do, having nothing more to lose. It's not the same thing. People in the world, when they're losing things or they don't have anything, they strive. They work by the work of their own hands. They work according to the world. There's nothing to lose. And I've told you before that I lived on the street. I grew up in a home where my mother rode my bike, not even her bike. She didn't even have her own bike. She rode my bike to work to go cook fries in a kitchen at a high school to support her children. I lived on the street. I crawled out of a tent in the morning, packed it up before the sprinklers went on or before anyone showed up in the church courtyard where I was sleeping. I lived that life. I know what it's like. So I'm not speaking without understanding. I know what that is like. I know what it's like to live in transitional housing so that I can work and get the money to be able to rent a little studio. I know what it's like to not have a car but ride my bike with the little child seat on the back, drop my little baby off over at my mom's so that I can go to work and then ride back home with that little baby seat to go grocery shopping with all my groceries in that little baby seat. It's not as though I don't get that. It's not as though God just gave me wealth, handed it over to me. No, that's where I come from, guys. I went from crawling out of a tent, rolling it up in the morning to avoid those sprinklers, carrying everything I own in my arms and trying to find a way to get off the street. I know what that is like. So I'm not demeaning anybody's situation. But what I will tell you right now is I also know what it's like to, by the work of my own hands, muster up that will and courage. And while praying, I am not removing God from this situation. God was very much with me, but he has shown me the difference between that and what I am doing right now, between taking me through that and what I am doing right now. I know what it is to strive and to go to work and to go to school and to get that doctorate while trying to raise my child as best I can, believing that what I was doing was right, knowing that I couldn't waitress until I was 60 and 70 and 80 years old, and that I was going to have to build a future for my daughter, and that's why I did it. And I strived, and I worked by my hands according to the world, and there was nothing to lose, guys. I was already at the bottom. There was nothing to lose. I hadn't given anything for anyone but myself. And then I got that doctorate, getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go wait tables, going straight to school, being at school until 10:30 at night, sometimes being up till 2:30 in the morning to work on my dissertation, all to wake up at 5:30 or be at work at 5:30 and do it all over again. And did I have a day off? No, because on my days off, I was with my baby. Every second was taken up. There was no rest and there was no help. Thank God I had my mother to help me to watch my child, but I didn't have emotional support. I didn't have financial support. I had a family who basically thought I was a loser because I had a baby at 17 and who always acted like I wasn't doing enough. I worked for what I had, and I worked harder than anyone I have ever met in my entire life. And I'm not saying that there aren't people in the world who are doing this, who are doing more than what I did. But what I am saying is I didn't have anyone to relate to. I didn't have anyone to commiserate with. No one in my cohort was a parent or a single parent when we started out. And then when they became parents, they would do things like, oh, I can't show up to school because I'm a parent now. That excuse wasn't good enough for me. Mommy and daddy were buying them houses so that they could, have a stable place to live in while going to graduate school. Like, that's what I was surrounded with. So I was completely alone doing this. And I rose, and God made me rise to be the most successful career woman of anyone that I knew. I was incredibly successful. God gave me that, but he didn't just hand it to me. He gave it to me and rewarded me for hard work, and he gave it to me to teach me something. And he gave it to me to later show me that it was not of him and give me the option to choose him or that. Let me tell you the difference between what I did then and what I do now. Because then I was striving by the work of my own hands according to the world. There was nothing to lose, and I hadn't given anything for anyone but myself. Let me tell you what I do now. I don't work by my hands. I abide in him. I wait on him. I ask him, where do you want me to go? Only according to his plan, not according to my plans. I don't have plans anymore. I'm not even allowed to plan anymore. I'm not allowed to say, okay, Lord, I have this house and I have, that property and I have my savings and I have my retirement. No, he had me live on my savings, live on my retirement, slowly watch everything that I worked for gone. He didn't have me invest. He didn't have me do things according to the world. He wants me to trust in him, to abide, to wait on him, ask where he wants me to go, only according to his plan. And I stand to lose everything. Whereas before I stood to lose nothing, guys. There's a reason Jesus says that it's difficult for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. And it's not because all people who are rich are evil or acquired wealth by unjust gains, okay? It's not because of that. Because even in the context with which Jesus said that to the rich man, that rich man said, all these things I've done. He asked, how can I get into the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus said, you know the commandments. And he lists off the commandments. And the man says, all these things I've done. And Jesus loved him. Jesus knew that he was telling the truth. So it's not as though he looked on him and said, oh, you wretch, you've been doing all these bad things to acquire your wealth. I don't know why people are so callous over this, to act like I was just handed wealth or something. No, I worked my tail off for that. I don't know anyone who did what I did. Do you know how quickly I gave it up? How quickly I gave it up when God said, this is not of me, what's it going to be? How quickly I gave it up. All of those years of working my tail off, of managing those businesses and absorbing the liabilities and investing and everything else that I did in the midst of, by the way, my house burning down, both of my parents dying, my daughter launching to college. I was building those 3 businesses and my health deteriorated, me getting sick and everything else. I was not handed wealth. So everything that I invested into this, everything that I imagined for my life, the justification that I had in my heart of, well, this is for my daughter's future. And now my daughter isn't even capitalizing on that. She doesn't get that money. She doesn't have some cushy life. She has chosen to live in poverty, even after getting her own doctorate and watching her friends make $400,000 a year. She gave that up to live a godly life, raising the child that God gave her and turning her back on that scientific field that she went into, because God did the same with her. What's it going to be? I've proven myself to you. What's it going to be? Is that the same as anyone else who gives up a career? Come on, guys. Don't be dumb. Don't be insulting. The things that you do in God are so incredibly difficult because they don't make any sense to the world. And the world thinks you're an absolute idiot. You don't get the support of the world. And there are times when you have to question your own sanity. Like, Lord, are we sure? Like, I heard this from you, right? Because this doesn't make sense in any other situation. Like, it does not make sense that I am not selling what I have and going and investing in something, but then I'm sitting here just watching everything go because you have told me to sit still. You've told me I set you up this way. You stay in the position that I put you in when I called you. Is this the same as someone coming to this country with a couple bucks in their pocket? No, it's not. Does it mean that that's not a big deal for someone to do that? Of course it's a big deal. Don't equate what I'm doing to anything that anybody else is doing, unless you would like God to show you so that you can actually appreciate what his servants are offering. It's not the same thing. It's also not the same thing that you went and got a job or that you live within your means. I mean, all of us are supposed to be doing that. Congratulations. It's not the same thing. I stand to lose everything, and not because of any other reason than I have trusted and followed the Father. I have given everything for him. And I'm not just talking about material possessions. I'm talking about every plan, every dream, every imagination that I have given for him to sit here with a kernel of seed left in the barn to be an offering for you and share with you and demonstrate to you this is what it looks like to live out your faith. I don't have a storage. I don't have anything. I let myself be pushed to the wall, dripping off the wall. I'm not looking around at what I have and going, okay, well, I'll pack this stuff up. I'm looking around at what I have, and I'm looking at everything that I built. And that's what's left of what he has had me give. Okay? There's a difference. When God is stripping you down like that, there is a difference. I'm looking around at what I worked for, crawling out of that tent. I'm looking at the home that my grandchild comes to visit once a week, the life that I have, and wondering, what's next? Will you have me give this up too? Not because I made a stupid decision, not because I did something wrong, but for the kingdom of heaven. There's a difference for the work that he's had me doing. There is a big difference between that and giving it up for any other reason. I bought this house and I kept building. I kept working. I kept striving. I set out to buy a building and I kept striving. I bought the building while the Father was drawing me to the Son. Do I deserve to lose everything, guys? No, I don't deserve to lose everything, but I've given it up as the Father has told me to give it up. I still have loans. I took on the liability of those businesses. I still have the bills of a life that he's not allowed me to capitalize on. I'm still paying for things that I don't even use. A building that he doesn't even have me renting out. I provide housing for free for someone and pay all of those utilities myself. I gave up everything to serve him. It is not the same thing as losing everything for any other reason. Nor is it the same as being at the bottom and having nothing to lose. Do I not deserve to enjoy what I worked so hard for? For my daughter and my son and my grandson to not have to suffer in poverty, and yet all of us do it for the sake of his kingdom. I was building a life. I was building wealth and a future for my family. And I know that I'm building wealth and a country, as the word says, a country in heaven now. But it's not the same as having nothing to lose. I'm not diminishing what anyone else has done, but you are. You are when you tell me that it's the same as someone coming here with nothing in their pocket. You are when you tell me that you somehow understand because you compare a situation that is not comparable. You don't understand until you've been in this position. And it's clear that the person saying that does not understand, has not taken the time to really understand what it is that I have given up in order to serve. To serve. If you showed up a minute ago, you're not serving yet. You're partaking of the offering that I'm giving and claiming that you know. I'm giving you an opportunity to consider through my offering so that you can be built without having to go through all of this yourself. But if you keep acting like you get it without any consideration as to the actual reality of what I've done, the actual reality of what Jesus did, of what the apostles did, God's going to bring you there because you are going to know what you've been given. Consider me. Consider the apostles. Consider Jesus. Stop acting like you get it and actually consider it with God. I continue to live in faith right up to that last kernel of grain left in the barn, believing that he's going to provide. And no, I'm not looking around at what I'll have to pack up. I'm looking at a life that I worked my life away to make. I'm looking at what I didn't sit here planning to sell or get rid of slowly. I'm looking at a life that if I'm wrong, I would have to give away in a hurry because I have sat still and trusted in the Lord. It is not the same as having nothing to lose. And I can tell you that because I've had nothing to lose. I could have made intelligent and sound decisions by my flesh in this world to sell both properties with enough time to purchase something outright and live in an area that I actually want to live in with my children so that my children don't have to work or can work at their leisure. That was my intention, guys. That was my intention in my life, at least to reward my daughter for the time that she had to spend all those years away from me while I was working and going to school full time. All that time that I was so exhausted by the time I got her with me that all I could do was lay down and ask her, okay, what movie do you want to watch? And she would say things to me like, you're just going to fall asleep anyway. You think I didn't sacrifice, or was I just handed wealth by God? But God has told me to sit tight. He told me that he set me up here. Stop telling me that you understand when you don't. It would be better for you to keep quiet than to insult my offering like that. I'm not telling you so that you can tell me that you have a situation in which you relate to what I'm going through. I'm telling you so that you can understand what God requires and have an example so that when you go through it, you can remember, I saw Carrie go through this. She talked about it. She talked about how hard this was so that you can slowly be built by considering the things that I'm presenting to you. So that when you're living during the Antichrist reign and you're losing things you don't deserve to lose and you're giving up because the world is telling you to do something that's in opposition to God, and so you give up the life that you built because God says to you, now what's it gonna be? That you will take heart and you'll remember that you know someone who did that too. Don't tell me you're doing it now when you showed up a minute ago. You have not begun to serve. You have no idea what you're talking about and what God requires. If God is now bringing you lower each day and you just showed up, you have no right to say that you understand what he has been doing for years in me. From a person who's offering, you receive. Please stop that nonsense. I tried to say this in another video. You didn't hear it. You need to hear this now. It is insulting. And it's telling me that you really are not understanding the position that you need to take with God's servants to understand what you've been given and how you need to be built in considering what they have experienced, the position that God has brought them into, because you are going to be brought into positions like that. And if you start doing that work right now, it's not going to be so painful later. And it's not really, an option. If you're going to serve him, you're going to suffer with him. And I'm telling you right now, this is part of the way that you suffer. What I am going through right now is standing firm in the promises that God has made to me, in the promises that he said early on when he very first drew me to himself, that he had set me up on this mountain, right? I live on a mountain, that he had set me up on a mountain. I didn't know what he was talking about back then, but that he said to me as time has gone on, when I've said, Lord, should I sell the properties and go buy something outright, somewhere in a remote area where, the kids, Jeremiah can live in a place where he's not, I hate living like this. I hate living close to worldly people, but he didn't have me doing that. Even when people were contacting me, talking Ellen G. White and saying, oh, it's time for us to all move to the wilderness. And I, for a second, I'm like, yeah, that sounds lovely. Let's do that. No, God didn't have me do that. You know why, guys? You know why? Because I serve him and he requires me to be in a position of lowliness. Do you know how happy I'd be living in the wilderness away from everybody? I would be so happy, but I wouldn't see what is needed for me to grieve and lament the detestable things that are being done in Jerusalem. All I would do is go hide out and go build a life for myself. So he doesn't let me do that. He doesn't let me go hide out with the fools who think that they're going to somehow I don't know, escape the Antichrist reign? I mean, really? That is so wicked. You think you're going to escape what God is sending because you went and moved to a remote area? I don't think so. And no doubt they justify that by, oh, we're setting ourselves apart from the world. No, you set yourself apart from the world by the way that you live, by what's in your heart. I would have loved to have been able to plan and get out of here. I would have loved it so long as he said, okay, that's what you get to do. But it isn't. He told me the exact opposite. You are to stay where I placed you when I called you. You are to trust that I'm going to take care of you. Do you know what it's like to place all your trust in God and make decisions that you never would have made? Ever as a businesswoman, would I ever have made these decisions? I made very calculated decisions in the world. Don't think I went from crawling out of a tent to making stupid financial decisions. But see, this would be a stupid financial decision to the world, to trust in God, to trust that he's going to take care of me. Even while I have 3 months left of living expenses and one person has seen that building. 3 months left of living expenses, one person has visited that building. How would you be feeling right now? When you've given everything up for him, when you've trusted him, how would you be feeling? Do you think that maybe like every betrayal you've ever experienced in your life or every betrayal you ever had with your parents might come up, might give you an opportunity to sort that one through? Well, if you know my story, you know that I gave up everything for my dad. So all of that stuff factors in here. I gave up everything for my dad for him to betray me and use his kids to try to hurt my mother. So all of that stuff comes up, that stuff that I've got to sort through, the faith that I've got to hold on to and stand in. It's not the same as anything that I ever did in the world. And God is giving me an opportunity for, a little more roots to come out and to really put my faith where my mouth is. That's why I asked you to fast with me, so that you can be built in this offering as well. Please consider what I've said and discern with God, because I know that if you discern this with God, he's going to correct you and he's going to bring your heart into the place that you need to be so that you can understand the way that you need to be standing. That's what the witnesses are doing right now. They are an example to you, a witness to you of how to really live out your covenant. Don't insult that offering.